Well, I guess thank you so much for your time. I guess I'd like to ask the question, what live music in other cities around the world has suffered from the digitalisation of music, and by that we mean streaming, etc. Because of this, Melbourne's live music scene continues to thrive even though we have digitalisation. And we have so many, kids nowadays have iPads and iPhones and so many other, distractions. But we still continue to thrive. We still are the live music capital of Australia. Is this an accurate statement? Are we still, despite the distractions, how are we doing this? How is this happening?
I would like to think that advancements in technology are, as Jane said, I work for The Push. We're a youth music organisation, and I see more and more young people creating music now and being able to translate that into a live context. I think it's just that we need to put the supports in place to allow them to translate from, particularly like we're seeing more and more young people creating music as electronic music producers in their bedrooms. And which is great because of this technology. It's broken down all of those barriers that you once maybe, had to get into a studio or had to have access to particular musical equipment, but nowadays those barriers are just not there. So I think that what Melbourne and Victoria has been great is really fostering and supporting, breaking down those barriers to allow new artists, emerging artists to go through onto a live context. Would you agree with that?
Do. I work in music publishing, so it is quite different to the live perspective. So I thought I'd probably bring a different approach to this, not to throw a spanner in the works too early.
It's okay, you can.
Yeah, good. Melbourne is an incredible live city, but I think, social media is definitely an asset when it comes to live shows. But where we suffer in the music industry is the sale of music and how it's digested. So that to me is a big issue. People wanting music for free. It's very much a take situation. It's just not how Mother Nature expected it to be. It's give and take. So that is where, income is a real problem, and it's particularly about the artists. So if we want a thriving, industry, which means, artists being able to do this as a living and live, and Alice can talk about this further as well, but even playing live, the up-and-coming artists and certainly, bands playing live, there's not a great deal of income in there if people are not also purchasing your music. So by the time you pay the mixer or costs, your mixer probably gets 3 times more than what you're getting for that live performance. So I think that's also a big reality.
How would you agree with that, Alice? How do you survive being an up-and-coming artist in Melbourne?
It can be a challenge, especially when I started out. I've been maybe performing properly for two years. And at the beginning it was really hard because fees were really low. You might just break even with what you're getting, and that doesn't take into account like the time that you're putting in to get there and travel and rehearse. So that can be hard. But in terms of like the live music, I guess because I spend a lot of my time around other people that are making music and going to see shows, that's not something that I notice a lack in, but definitely with music sales is such a challenge when people do have these services where you can access them for free, and it's not the same as I suppose it used to be. And because I've only been in the industry for 2 years, that's how I've come into it, so I don't have a comparison. Sure. But I know that it's not filling my bank account.
Well, Kay, a question for you. How does Melbourne support upcoming artists like Alice?
Yeah, I think we've been really lucky, particularly with the investment from the state government over the last 3 to 4 years through the Music Works package. So that was over $22 million that was invested into the contemporary music sector. And at The Push, we have been responsible for delivering a series of professional development programs along with Music Victoria around really, supporting through mentoring programs and through songwriting programs and industry seminars and workshops, that have allowed emerging artists to network. I think like what I touched on before about we're seeing more and more young artists making music in isolation. I think that's all the more reason why we need to be supporting artists to come together and meet like-minded people and collaborate and to really, you know, foster that community, a physical community which can sometimes be lost in an online space. But also from that Music Works package, we've been seeing a number of grants that have gone out to artists, and I was just chatting with Alice before, who I think may have received a quick response grant. So there's been a whole, you know, that stimulus is, I don't think that we can downplay the importance that has had in building and supporting our sector.
It's interesting to note that a lot of musicians moved to Melbourne to further their career, and someone who went through the push in his alumni is Courtney Barnett, who's certainly not from Melbourne, but decided that she needed to move to Melbourne in order to further her career, and now she's got the worldwide stage. I think she's a fantastic success story. But what is it about Melbourne that makes them want to move here? Is it the live music venues? Is it the sense of music community? Is it more? Linda, what do you think?
I think it's like a connection. There's a community here, so it's really just as basic as that. You know, it's supported in all those ways that Kate has mentioned, but at its core, there's a real, you know, connection with other musicians. It's sharing information, playing several different, you know, people's bands, or you know, writing with others. But I think that's what it is, you know, you're merging with other artists.
And I think more than ever, we're seeing greater representation across our community. It's not just, you know, like I remember in the 90s when I was going to underage gigs and stuff, the people on the stages all pretty much looked like the same kinds of people in the same bands. And now more than ever, our stages are really reflective of the true Melbourne and Victorian community that is so diverse here. And, you know, that's through the support of, you know, individual collectives. Like, you know, there's Hysterical Records, and they support female and gender non-binary people in creating music. And, you know, Girls Rock have been really important in creating safe spaces for young women to learn instruments. And I think all of those kinds of projects that foster that community of different people, and then being on our stages, you know, that is what leads to the vibrancy of a live music scene that is, you know, you go and you look in your audiences and you look on your stages, it's all different people going to shows now, and I think that's what's integral in long-term sustainability for our sector, so that it's not just one group of, you know, middle-aged white dudes playing guitars.
Well, I think, the Push Live at the Steps is a great example of an all-ages show put together, drug and alcohol-free event. And what was the figures for that? Yeah,
we had 10,000 young people come to our show in the Treasury Gardens last year. And I think that proves that more than ever, you know, there is a future live music audience there. We just need to be providing opportunities for younger people to, you know, of all backgrounds, to be coming together and having a live music experience.
Well, another challenge shared by most global cities has been the need to respond to a worldwide emphasis on creating those safer environments in 24-hour cities in ways which ensure amenity for residents and patrons, while at the same time ensuring viability of creative spaces. Those creative spaces, should they just be live music venues, or should they be, you know, a small little factory, creative space, workspace? I mean, what do those spaces look like, or should they look like in the future down the track? Because are we shifting away from pubs and clubs, our traditional live music venues?
What kinds of places have you been playing? Like, where have you been seeing more younger, you know, interesting audiences hanging out?
My brain is a little bit all over the place in thinking about what I've done in the last month even. But I do like it when you play in spaces that you don't expect to be a venue and they've turned it into one. I really can't think of one off the top of my head, which is terrible.
It's like warehouse and parlour gigs.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking before too. Yeah, I've played on like what are they called? I've played on roofs, like that are like sort of facing out onto Swanston Street, which is interesting, and
different and fun. I do like those unconventional spaces, but I think it's more just about, doesn't really matter what the space is so much, but it's about sort of like the safety net that's provided for you in those spaces. Especially for me, I'm a First Nations person, so stepping into venue environments aren't always easy for me. So they're not always catered to me. So I find that sort of the most important thing is just like what they're actually giving you as support, not so much what they're giving you in the physical space.
And does Melbourne provide that for you, do you find?
It can, not always though.
Okay, well, so what can we do better?
I mean, that's such a long conversation and such a big question, and definitely not one that I can speak for everybody, because I'm just one, and I'm also not a traditional person from Melbourne. But I think just continuing the conversations with the people that are the traditional landowners here in this city, and just empowering them, because I think, there's definitely been power that's been lost over the years. So I think that's really important. And I think because I'm from regional Victoria, it is a lot better here in Melbourne. You hear people doing acknowledgements of country and welcome to countries, which instantly for me makes me feel more welcome, because I know that they're paying those respects. But you go into the country and that's not really language that's there. So I think that's something that Melbourne has that really attracted me to living here. And I've been here for maybe 5 years, and I thought that would be my expiration date. But now I find it so hard to leave, because it does give you so many opportunities and connections if you're in the music industry. And there are, a lot more safe spaces for women and people of colour here, which I think is great.
And I have to, got Patty, from the CEO of Music Victoria, is here, and just at the Music Victoria Awards this year, there was a real spike in Indigenous artists performing. Baker Boy, cleaned up the night, another Indigenous artist who's made Melbourne home and has really thrived here. That was wonderful to see. And Mojo Juju doing so well and performing live. And I guess just even the voting criteria this year for Music Victoria Awards was you had to have a certain percentage of females, so you, whatever band or artist you were nominating, you had to count the gender, I guess, and that, that's something we've not seen before, and we haven't had to think about before. And we also need to think about, I guess, our Indigenous representation as well, and that could be perhaps something we think about in the future. I do want to ask, does anyone have any questions thus far for any of our panel, who are all amazing women, I must say, which, we're seeing the shift, we're getting there. Would someone like to comment on the seemingly shifting tide of female equality and what this might mean for the music industry? Linda, I think you're quite qualified to speak about this.
Well, I started working in the music industry in 1990. So I have a few decades. Not a couple of decades, I'd like to say, but it's a few decades. Look, it's very simple to me. It just means equality. It doesn't really mean that things are going to get any better or worse having more women. It really is just about equality, and I think people get it very confused. I think it becomes very messy, and there's misconception and misunderstanding about it. I really think it's important to keep that conversation very simple, and by having that equality and diversity, surely it's going to bring interesting, conversation. It's not going to be one-sided.
And as a CEO yourself, Kate, how are you finding it?
I think it's important that, not just in a venue context, not just in an artist, booking context, but in everything that we do in our work, in positions of power, that we are supporting women and people of colour and gender non-binary people to really be represented in the work that we do, in the staff that we employ. And I think from doing that, that's just instantly how then you see the trickle-down effect into everything that's made up in our music community. And it is, I think, at the forefront of everyone's minds right now. It's not like something that, and I think social media has really supported that in calling out lineups, in calling out, appointments to roles, in all kinds of things. And I think, being appointed as a young CEO female, a statewide organisation. I hope that it says to lots of other young women that, hey, this is totally possible, and I think it's a really exciting time, and there is a great amount of support for people like me and people like all of us right now in our industry, and it is a real community, and it's a good time.
Excellent. Does anyone have any questions? Yes. We do. Well, I can only speak from Triple M's point of view. I don't know what other commercial radio stations do, but purely from my perspective, as far as Indigenous artists, proud Yorta Yorta man Scott Darlow has been an addition to our playlist in the last couple of years, both with his version of the Goanna song, Solid Rock, and also he released a song under the name Drought Breakers for the Buy a Bale campaign. He's someone that we've got a very close relationship. But we could always do better, absolutely. If you want to get in that commercial radio versus ABC debate, it's a long debate. I can only speak from my perspective as a presenter on Triple M. I present the Homegrown show every Sunday night at 8 p.m, whereby I try and play 3 unsigned artists every week. And they can be from anywhere. They can be unsigned. I always try for an unsigned artist wherever I can. And look, I get submissions from all over Australia. I can only do so much on a commercial radio station. But, and yes, we could probably do better, but once you enter that commercial radio argue that they are a commercial radio station, and they see the music industry as an affiliate, but they're not part of the music industry. So it's a really long, drawn-out conversation. But look, personally, I'm trying to do what I can with only 2 hours a week to do it. So I'm trying, but we can always do better.
Can I just jump in on the radio thing for a minute? I think it's really important to recognise the role that Triple J has played in supporting young artists and really developing their careers. And I know, Alice, you won a competition through them last year, and Baker Boy as well. Like, there's so many incredible young artists whose careers are just skyrocketing now across Australia and internationally because of the support. And I think that there's really been a shift there in Triple J as well, in terms of ensuring that they have representation across the artists that they're playing and supporting into, opportunities at various festival slots and stuff. And I think they're really leading the way there, and we really are, and this is outside of Victoria, but we really are lucky to have a national youth broadcaster like them, who is still, despite looking internationally at the way in which young people consume music, the fact that they are still a incredibly relevant brand for young people across Australia is really powerful, and something that we should all be, really recognising.
Are there any other questions? In that case, I would love to thank Alice Skye, Linda Bossides and Kate Duncan for your time this morning here at Insights 2018.